Hey folks, in case you missed it, the single barrels have started rolling in. Both barrels of the Jack Daniel's single barrel barrel-proof rye are available through Hudson Wine Market, with direct links in my social media pages and Instagram bio. These also went out to patrons with a special discount code. These barrels have been going so quickly that honestly, I don't even know if there are going to be any left by the time this is posted. So if they are available and you want them, trust me, don't wait because someone else is going to grab them first. Next up is the Barrell Rye Finished in Armagnac Casks. This is going live on October 2nd. This incredible pick was done in partnership with the guys at This Is My Bourbon podcast. The Timbip guys are great friends, and I'm thrilled to have this barrel come into the shop. On October 2nd, Patreon members of both podcasts will have first dibs with free shipping for Patreon supporters. No limits, no minimums, free shipping for Patreon supporters. So up your Patreon pledge now if you want to grab them before everyone else and get that free shipping code. Just want to take a quick second. Thank you so much. From the bottom of my heart, thank you to all the supporters, especially my friends on Patreon. You've put a ton of investment into the pod and the site through the years. And as these single barrels start rolling out and additional products start rolling out, I'll keep providing as many perks as possible to those who have supported me along the way and continue to join. If you're not a patron, if I was on the outside, sounds like now's the time to join. All right, enough updates. Now on to a new episode of the Whiskey Ring Podcast. Hey everyone, welcome to a new episode of the Whiskey Ring Podcast. Today is a special bonus episode that, if you're listening to it when it goes live, has some pretty fun news attached to it. So here to join me for that news is Tripp Stimson from Barrell Craft Spirits. He is, I'd say, probably, number 2 guy at Barrell, right behind Joe Beatrice himself. Maybe even co-equals on that one, but he is a leading face of Barrell, of blending, and for blending in the spirits industry. So Tripp, welcome on.
Thanks for having me, David. Really excited to be here and talk about all the goings on with the company and specifically a certain barrel that you've selected. So, we're really looking forward to this.
Awesome. So, yes, we will start off with that barrel. So it's been put in the show notes as, coming soon. It's been posted on social media, but now, as of this episode going live today, as you're hearing it, those barrels, or that barrel, those bottles are now available. I'm so happy. So this is a Barrell Rye finished in Armagnac casks. It came in at a wonderful 120.14 proof, so 60.07 ABV. And I knew that as soon as I started to do barrel picks for the podcast, for the website, that Barrell was going to be at the top of my list to get. And I was thrilled when, just as I was switching that part on, you guys came out with a private release series of the rye with all of these different finishes you could choose from. So we'll start with my barrel, but I want to ask about the other ones as well.
So we're really excited to launch the rye finish series. We did the whiskey prior to. We've done the bourbon as well, and rye was really the next progression in the series for us. And in finishing rye whiskeys, it's really interesting to see how they actually hold these finishes comparatively to whiskeys and bourbons. It seems like in a lot of these cases, and specifically the one that you've chosen, the Armagnac, that the higher rye content in these particular barrels seems to want to hold on to, in specifically the Armagnac, the sweeter notes from the brandy. I find it real interesting in the one that you selected that there is quite a bit of spice from the rye whiskey, and it balances very well with the sweet notes from the brandy. And the oiliness, I think, from that is there as well. So you get a nice coating of the tongue from this particular sample. So great choice, great selection for this. And I'm really glad you're finally getting your hands on this guy.
Oh, yeah. And I should say, you guys turned around the bottling and having those things ready faster than any company I've ever seen. It's usually for people listening who may not have done a barrel pick before or haven't heard the back end process. It usually takes, I don't know, months, 3, 4, 6 months to get a barrel pick. I think you guys had the cases ready in about 3 weeks, which was just stupendous. Uh, but yeah, so to jump off of your point, I totally agree. I mean, these notes, when I try this, and I should say before I go any further, this was picked not only by me, but also by this is my bourbon podcast. So Perry at Tim Bip helped me out with not just choosing it, but also confirming for me how above and beyond this barrel in particular was. So we had three options that I chose. We had the Armagnac, a Sauterne finish, and a Jamaican rum finish. Now, I love all three of those, and I've seen all three of them work as finishes, particularly with Ryes. And I tried the Sauterne first, and then the other one, and then the Armagnac last. I liked the first two, and then the Armagnac just was explosively good. The As you said, the spice of the rye really held up, but it was aged or finished long enough in that Armagnac and that brandy to really get all those dark, jammy, brandy-esque flavors in there as well, without either part being lost, which is a big thing because you've done a ton
Huge.
of finishing. You know how hard it is to get that balance between spirit and finish.
You're 100% right. It is very detailed and very intentional, the steps that are taken to make sure that that balance remains. Because there's nothing worse than a finished product when you taste the product and either the finish isn't there, like you're looking for it and you can't find it, or
Mm.
when you taste it, the only thing you taste is the finish, and it's like, well, where's all the whiskey? What kind of whiskey
Mm.
is this? And then all these things start flowing through your head. It's like, are you trying to cover something up? Did you get something wrong? And so we pay very close attention to that balance between the underlying whiskeys that are in whichever finish we're working on, and sort of the contributing flavor congeners from the finish casks, to make sure that one doesn't overshadow the other, and that there's just enough balance between the two to where you get the overall experience of both of those components in the blend.
And so I know that we can't reveal the name of the Armagnac house from which the barrels came. So I won't ask you that question, but I'm hoping I can maybe ask instead the characteristics of the source of the Armagnac barrels that made you and the barrel team choose that source for the casks.
So specifically, there are different types of Armagnac casks that we have, and so I'm not 100% sure which one we used for this. However, I have a pretty good idea which one it is, just from the like you said, the jammy sweetness, the oiliness that sort of lingers in this blend. I have a pretty good guess, but I'm not going to be able to say for certain which one that is.
So let's look at it from a different perspective. So the company decides you're going to release this new line extension, private release Rye series, finished Ryes. And I think the initial list was something like 10 finishes available. Of course, the three that I mentioned, plus some wine casks, some additional rum casks. And as you were, I'd love to just go through that kind of thought process with you of how that project developed and how you came up with kind of those 10, if anything was left out.
Okay, so as I said previously, we had done some finishes in the
Mm.
private release series with whiskey initially, and then also the bourbon. And what this process has taught us over the years is that when you put blends together or you finish products, a lot of times something that you wouldn't think would work well with something else oftentimes turns out better than you think it will.
Mm.
So we just experiment with all kinds of things. And, it's not to say that everything we did is a home run, but when you start thinking about using, um, rye whiskey in an Armagnac barrel, or rum in an Isle of Scotch cask, let's say, even. And we could talk about that, some other time, but that's a fun project too. Um, the way the flavors work is fascinating, because you have this preconceived notion that it's going to go a certain direction and that it either will or it won't work. But to actually do the experiment and gather the data is really the best way to do this, because there's lots of great surprises that can come out of this. And so over the years, we've really honed our skills in on how to do this, and really what to expect. So the main 10 that we chose were just ones that we thought would work the best with the rye. And so we set up the experiments, and there's probably in total, I think there's 40 or 50 in total that we've gone through, that are either different concentrations of blends of whiskeys finished, or could be individual types of whiskeys finished for different lengths of time in the different finishing casks. And all of those are going to generate different products, right? Different flavor concentrations based on either the blend or the time in the barrel are going to create the nuanced flavor congeners that you're going to find in these individual products. So it's really going through the steps of generating the data to decide which one of these or which grouping of these that we wanted to put in the bottles.
And since we already have the cask, we've already got the bottles in store, so it's not going to affect anything. You willing to reveal which one of those might be your favorite?
Which it's in all out of all of them.
Well, let's say of the Ryes, let's say.
I like the Armagnac. I think you made an excellent choice with that one. And again, the rye and the sweetness from the brandy cask, the Armagnac casks work together is one that I really enjoy. And Armagnac as a finish in and of itself, with not only rye but also bourbon, I find very attractive.
Can't argue with that. So, in addition to talking about the rye, of course, it's a bonus episode with the launch of the rye. And before we go into the next set of questions, I did just want to mention that not only is this rye finished in Armagnac going to be going live at the time of this recording going live, but if you are a patron of the show, you will also be getting free shipping from the store for 1 bottle, 6 bottles, 2 cases worth. Let's show the folks at Barrell what we can do with those. Maybe set ourselves up for a second pick at some point. But yes, for patrons at $5 a month or more, you are going to get free shipping on these bottles. So throwing that out there. I don't have a freeze period. If you want to join, please do. There's going to be a lot of benefits coming up. And trust me, you're not going to want to drop out after just 1 month. And with that said, I'm going to move us into the next thing I want to talk to you about, which was that congratulations are in order. That Barrell recently not only hit the 10th anniversary, but opened a brand new facility in Jeffersontown, a suburb of Louisville. Now, I was very fortunate to attend the grand opening. It's a beautiful ceremony. We had local dignitaries. Of course, you spoke, Joe spoke, and then we got to taste the 10th anniversary bourbon blend and take a tour of the facility. And I think, number one, it was just fun to see all the people in the room and who showed up for this. And I think you guys had a great turnout, not only in numbers, but in quality of people who were in that room. And I'd love to just talk to you about it. So when did the idea for this facility start kicking around?
So, well, thank you, David, for the congratulations. And I'm glad you were able to make it. It was a real special day for us. It we've been working on this facility for a long time, and it really goes back 10 years and sort of the inception of Barrell and how we set things up 10 years ago with the idea of moving forward. And at that time, you have to understand that there were lots of people trying to get into the spirit space. And at that time, everybody thought you needed a distillery. And so, that's, when I was consult prior to working with Joe, I was doing a lot of consulting. And one of the things I would try to talk people into is to build a brand and not necessarily, go jump in with both feet into a huge project like building a distillery, especially if you've never done anything like this before. And so, Joe and I were very aligned on that idea. Joe had done a lot of homework and figured this out himself. Is what we really wanted was the brand, and to grow the brand organically over time and then justify the need to have the facility. So for many years, we actually would use leased space and contract facilities to do all of our blending and bottling. So that for the first 3 or 4 years, that's what we did. And we actually didn't get our first space until the end of 2016, early 2017. We actually leased our first space where we were able to bring barrels in. We actually got our own DSP. We were able to blend and bottle and do everything in house without using contract work. And so, as we're operating out of this lease space, it was a very small space by comparison, especially with what you saw here with this new facility. We were constantly designing through problems with smaller facilities and the way we were operating, and constantly thinking about what would the next facility look like. So as we're growing as a brand, what would we need? How would we want it to work? Through our experience with our processing and our bottling, how do we want to lay this out? What's the most efficient way to do things? What's the safest way? What's the most effective way? And so over the years, we really put a lot of intentional thought into the layout of what we would want to build into a facility. And then in 2000 and the end of 2021, we bought a 30,000 square foot building and tore everything out of it. There wasn't much in there to begin with, but we tore out all the electric, we tore out all the sprinkler system. We jackhammered up concrete. We literally took this thing to a blank slate, and then spent months with engineers and architects, and really intentionally laid this facility out for the way that we operate. So the office spaces are specifically designed. The bottling facility is specifically designed as, and also the blending processing space specifically designed for the way we operate, the way we create products, the way we work as a team. So it was a really proud day for us, being able to stand there and share that with all of our supporters from over the years, because it's been a long road. It's been a great road, but doing things a little differently than the industry is used to, and setting the goal and attaining that goal. We're very proud of that.
And I should say, I mean, during the celebration, the grand opening, we had, as media, as friends of Barrell, we had some really unfettered access to the entire facility. We were able to walk through and see everything. And I know that's not necessarily for the public to be walking through the bottling room, but this was before things weren't operational while we were doing that, of course. But I was still impressed by it because we could take pictures of everything. There was nothing hidden, and I think this is something that it took me a while to realize, but is very true. Is that you guys? I'm hoping this is not going to come out too sycophantic, but you guys pushed the boundaries of two really important things. Number one being transparency in sourcing. So I know NDAs prevent in most cases, if not all cases, you saying from exactly where in, let's say, Kentucky, Indiana, Tennessee, New York, that whiskeys came from. Sometimes, occasionally, we might know it just because there's only one that can support in Indiana, kind of thing, or things like
Right.
that, or Tennessee for a while. But it would in just in showing the states that you were doing. I remember I think there was a New Year's release that had 7 states on it, and then in
Hmm.
talking to the team, I think it was talking to Will Schragus, who was with you at the time. Uh, he said, "Well, it's 7 states on there, but it's not. It's more than 7 distilleries because some of the states have
Right.
multiple distilleries. So there's an element of transparency of kind of as far as you can go transparency, which needed appreciation. But there's also I think the more important one, which is pushing us forward with blending. And I don't think it's too much to say that Barrel has done more than any other brand to promote blending as a good word, again, in whiskey, in American whiskey. And I think it's something that's worth noting because we
Well,
still see
and I
a lot of, yeah.
sorry, I was just going to say I appreciate you saying that. It's you know, we feel like we have been sort of on the leading edge of the innovation of blending and finishing and sort of this quest for flavor and flavor concentration. And when we first started this, Joe and I were talking, and I remember this conversation very vividly, um, where we're talking about being blenders, and if we're going to be blenders, then we need to own the fact that we're blending. And we were already doing all of these things, and the transparency and all those things were there, and they were happening already. But it's the stigma around blending, because the history of blending, if you look into it, people used to put, what is it, late 1800s, early 1900s, people were putting all kinds of stuff in cheap whiskey, calling it bourbon, and so laws passed, things changed, but people still remember that when they were calling things, or when they were saying they were blending, they were putting things in there that weren't supposed to be there necessarily, to try to make it something that it wasn't. And so that stigma has been around for a lot of years. But our focus has always been 100% on what we put in the bottle. So by creating, by we'll say by blending, we are taking products that are created to the very best of the distillery's ability from wherever the product's coming from, and we're finding ways to layer in those flavor congeners and those flavor profiles with other places who have done the same thing, but their whiskey might be a little different. Maybe they use a different yeast strain or a different grain bill, or different maturation process, barrel char, what have you, and their finished product is a great product, but it's going to be different from somebody else's. And by focusing on the flavor congeners in each of these types of whiskeys that we're talking about, and being able to layer those together so that you still get to taste everything, like we were talking about with the rye and the Armagnac, keeping the flavors available so that you don't lose things and you don't cover things up. That's the magic in blending, is taking these things and putting them together and creating something that is greater than the sum of its parts so that they complement each other. So you get a full flavor experience and not just a glass of whiskey or a shot of whiskey. There's much more going on in there. And so we're very intentional about how we put these things together with that exact thing in mind.
I think that's been well communicated, both in what you just said, but also in the marketing that's gone out, in the communication that you do with fans, with consumers. In that, yeah, I think back on a lot of the barrel releases that I've gotten to try, both first just as a consumer and a fan of whiskey, and then later on, more recently as a media person, getting to try samples that are sent and things that aren't necessarily available. And as with, I think, any good company, or any company period, in the whiskey industry, of course I haven't liked every single blend. I don't think,
Sure.
I mean, I don't think it's reasonable to like every single one. That would be a little weird.
Uh,
Um,
uh.
But I I've written in several reviews of barrel products, I think, that even if I didn't like the end product, the intentionality and the care was still very noticeable. Like, you still knew, or I still knew, that it might not be to my palate, but someone thought about this blend. Someone worked on this blend, whether it's from 2 distilleries or 7 or 10, and someone else is going to like it because it's still a well-made product. And that, I think, ties back to these new releases with the rye blend, but also the ones you've done with bourbon and American whiskey. In that, for me at least, as someone, as a consumer, as media, and also as someone picking a barrel, it's easier to do, especially with a finish, when you know that the underlying product is good, because then you can just focus on, does the finish work with it? And in this case, it works beautifully. The spicy rye, the jammy fruit, there's so much flavor in it, and that's the biggest thing for me. But overall, though, just knowing that there's a good product underneath that someone has put care and time into makes the pick a lot easier.
Well, and to that point, I'd like to also say that when we put these products together, when we think about these things and we develop these products, we're doing that from the mindset of a consumer in a lot of ways. Because I'm a consumer, Joe's a consumer, Nick's a consumer. We like to buy products. We like things that bourbons that taste good. And so as we're constructing these products that we're blending, we're looking at it through the lens of a consumer. Maybe not 100%, but we're still thinking, you know, if I'm a consumer, I'm going to go buy this product. What am I going to think about this? I pour this in the glass. What's the experience? How does it look? How does it taste? How does it smell? And we're going through those exercises because we understand what it's like to buy something you don't like. And to your very point, you see the effort that we put into this. And so every time you see a barrel bottle, you know what kind of effort has gone into creating that product, whether you like it or not. You understand the effort it takes to create these types of things.
I think to that end and to that point, as we walk through the production facility, and these are all in pictures that I know I posted on social media and such, you can see there's both ends of the spectrum. There's the tasting lab where it looks like a laboratory where you've got tables and there are beakers in the corner and graduated cylinders. And then on the other end of the spectrum, there are just massive, towering mixing vessels that these products are coming out of. So you get the micro level and the macro level. And it certainly gave me an appreciation for how you take something on the small and expand it and see how it works on that macro level. It just made me think of a question. Have you ever had a case where you mix something and you blend something really well, or that you think is really good on a micro level, and then you expand it into a larger product using those balances and specifications, and you find it just didn't taste the same, it didn't come out the same?
That happens quite a bit, actually. We have
Really?
a process for how we step these things up. And if I back up a little bit, we're working with, in some cases individual barrels, but in some cases we'll have sort of a representative blend of a lot or a grouping of barrels that we'll use as the component in order to get a better representation of the barrels once they're dumped. Because as I'm sure you're well aware, even if two barrels created on the same day, put in the same rickhouse side by side, in 10 years, those barrels are not going to taste identical, right? There's going to be some variation along the way. There's 100 different places where you can gather variation throughout their lifespan. So by the time we actually get these barrels, a lot of times they don't taste exactly like they're supposed to, or maybe they're not all the same. There's going to be inherent variation in everything that we're using. So we kind of have the expectation that it's going to be a little bit different. So as we're systematically building up the blend volume and the different concentrations. We'll make smaller adjustments to try to keep it as close to the lab blend as we can. Taking something from 20 mils in a Glencairn glass to a 10,000 gallon tank, it's not necessarily a straight line. It takes a little bit of creativity sometimes to make sure you hit the target.
It's good to know. I have never asked that question before, and of course, practically it makes sense. But who knows? Someone could have just as easily said, "Yeah, it works just fine." Got this number of
Yeah,
barrels, percentages, it works out just fine. But again, it highlights
yeah,
the care. What that you're going to have variations, and thus you can anticipate them and try to adjust.
that's right.
So how many of those tanks did you have? I didn't count them while I was there.
So there's 4 6,000 gallon tanks and 4 10,000 gallon tanks. So it's 64,000 total new blending tank volume for us. And then currently we have our 2 existing 6,000 gallon tanks, and then a couple of smaller tanks that we have that we use as well.
So it's a good estimate. You probably have around like 80,000 gallons of space to mix with across the
Yeah,
different facilities. Yeah.
yeah. I think if you count all the totes and everything we have, it's up over 100.
Wow. So of course the obvious answer to this question is to say you can do a lot, but what does this facility and having all that additional room not only to blend but to house barrels, to have a brand new large bottling room, and all of these different spaces, what does this new facility allow you to do that you really couldn't do before?
So it's going to do a couple of things. One, just the sheer size and volume and capacity of the building and the equipment and everything. It's just going to allow us to do more, right? Um, it's also going to allow us to do more at one time. It has also been designed through our experience with smaller facilities to be extremely efficient. So when you work in a small space, you get very good at navigating tight spaces and moving things 100 times to get to one thing and then moving everything back. And so we took all these lessons that we learned and created this space so that we now have a much larger physical space to allow us to do larger quantities of different projects and multiple projects at one time. And in addition to that, we also bought a rick house back in at the end of last year, an 18,000 barrel rick house, which really layers into this nicely because when you don't have any space, you're able to maybe blend in house, but you can't store anything there. So you're in a just in time business where you're trying to get your all of your raw bottling goods, your barrels, everything there just in time to dump the barrels, put the blend together, put it in a bottle, and ship it all back out. And so that logistical nightmare has been our life for however many years now, just trying to make sure everything shows up when it's supposed to so that we can get the job done. Now that we have a rick house, we can take possession of a large majority of our barrels. And then when we need them, we can just drive down to the rick house and get them, bring them back to our facility and process everything there. So we have enough room to have all the raw material on site. The barrels are, just a few miles away. So now we've taken all of the just in time knowledge that we gathered over the last handful of years and put all that to good use in designing this facility. So now we can get our barrels quicker, we can store things longer, we can do larger volumes, we can do multiple projects at once, and we have much higher throughput on our bottling lines too. So, and then everything in processing actually communicates with bottling, so there's no real transport of liquid back and forth. It's all piped and integrated, and the pumps and fillers and everything talks to each other. So it's extremely efficient.
And the this question just thought of was so this particular barrel that we picked, it was the rye that was finished in Armagnac casks for 12 months. So you said you bought the Rickhouse, the 18,000 barrel Rickhouse last year. In the interim, where if these barrels needed finishing, where were you able to age them or mature them?
They actually stayed at our other facility. So in our other facility, we had space. We could put about 1,000 barrels on pallets stacked, and we could still manage to work around those barrels. It was extremely difficult, but we sectioned off some of that space so that all of the finishing barrels could stay in house, so we could pull samples. And
Gotcha.
so what that also did is, by having to remove some of the barrels that were normally there to allow room for the finishing barrels, that then adds another cog in the wheel to the just-in-time process, because when we needed those barrels, they had to be brought back in as well. So, there's this constant juggling act and logistics game that we play.
This month's Impact Spotlight is on a new whiskey from Adelphi, Maclean's Nose, a new blended Scotch whiskey expertly crafted to have a West Coast character with both a high malt content at 70% and a high proportion of ex-sherry casks. Maclean's Nose is both a nod to Ardnamurchan's rugged Western Peninsula home with its beautiful landmark on the south coast of the peninsula, and as an homage to the long mentorship they've received from Mr. Charles Maclean. Maclean is an undisputed legend, affectionately referred to as the Chief Nose, since 1993, when the Adelphi name was revived as an independent bottler by Jamie Walker. Bottled at a super approachable 46% ABV, this is the perfect dram to sip while reading one of Charlie's acclaimed books. At an even more approachable $35 a bottle, this is a must-buy, especially for those of us who, much as we must love bourbon, are going to be fully bourboned out by the end of this month. Join me in the dram and look for Maclean's Nose in your favorite whiskey shop near you. The Whiskey Ring podcast is proudly sponsored by Impex Beverages. Makes sense. And it sounds like between the designed and built-in efficiency, the increased space, that these challenges that you might still have they're good challenges to have, because it means the more difficult ones of logistics are taken care of. So, and it was just a beautiful facility. I was very fortunate to look through it. People can see the pictures, and just again, congratulations on it. It's a great,
Thank you.
It's a great move. And so while I was there, obviously, like I said, we got to see the sample room, the room of where the barrel releases lined the walls and had different fill levels, of course, because people are trying them, and all that. One room in particular really piqued my interest, and it was I'll paint a visual picture for you so you know where I'm going. But when you go off the entry hall and the tour started, you go past the bottom of the room, it's on your right, and you go straight, and it looks like a mini lab where you're on the right hand side, you've got metal shelving with a lot of the different releases, and then on the left side there's a desk, there's also more releases. But just inside on the left hand side, there were a lot of bottles, I should say, that were not barrel, that they were from other brands. They weren't necessarily in the branded bottles, let's say, but they look more like, they were decanted or sampled from, but they were from many, many different brands. And I won't mention which ones right now, but I was curious as to the purpose of those, that set of bottles, if you will.
Are you talking about our sample room that had all of?
Yeah, so it was a sample room. So like all the barrel ones, the labeled barrel bottles and samples were on the right hand side as you enter, but then there was a set of shelving on the left that had from different distilleries and different producers. And I was just curious, is that just curious the purpose of that?
Well, I think if we're talking about the same room, the sample room, on the left hand side, there's a shelf that has lots of sample bottles that we that are there because we're pulling samples out of barrels. So we'll pull periodic samples out of barrels that we're finishing, and a lot of those are different size bottles and different shape bottles, just based on cost wise. You can just use sample bottles, are going to be a lot cheaper than our nice bottles for a finished product. But I'm not aware of any other brands that would have been in there. But if they were, I mean, we buy bottles all the time. I'm curious what other people are doing. I like to try other things. Again, back to the what we were talking about earlier. I'm a consumer too. I like to sample other stuff and be able to have conversations with other people in the industry about what they're working on and how projects turned out. So yeah, I mean, if there were other samples in there, I mean, we buy samples regularly just to have an idea.
And I figured that's probably what it was, and I'll see if I can find a picture of it. I'll send it to you after just to make sure we're talking about the same thing. Because if not, I'll
Okay.
just cut this and because then I'm not presenting right. But yeah, it was from different companies, and I figured the first thing I thought of was, I mean, they're doing so much work. They being you guys at Barrel are doing so much work with blending, trying, finishing that yeah, you got to keep an eye on the competition, on even friendly competition to see what other companies are doing with this. You know, as
And
you're
it's funny too. I don't even really think about it as competition. We don't. It's not a back and forth for us really. And we do things that we like to do. We're out in front on a lot of these things, and um, I don't view it necessarily as competition. I'm a curious person when it comes to bourbons and whiskeys, and especially if it's something that I haven't seen before or something that's been hyped up a lot. I like to try those things, and just as the consumer side of me comes out and says, "Wow, this is good. They did a nice job with this," or "Man, I really don't care for this, and maybe they should have done X, Y, or Z." So the consumer comes out, and then the scientist takes over. It's like, well, this is what I would have done to avoid X, Y, or Z. So.
and
Huh.
I have a question that I two questions actually that I really want to ask you that are more open ended, but I think that leads perfectly into a different one, which we'll jump into, which is the cask finishing series that Barrel's recently released. So the first two releases are the Barrel Bourbon cask finish series in Ambarana, and the second one being in the Tale of Two Islands casks. Got to try both at the
Yeah.
distillery and was fortunate to get samples sent to me as well on behalf of Barrel. So thank you for that. So I could taste at home because everything tastes better in the I keep saying distillery, I mean production facility, but everything tastes better
Yeah.
on site. Um, so the Tale of Two Islands was one of my favorite releases you've ever done. I
Oh wow, you got one of those. Good for you.
Yeah, it I loved it. The original, the Gray Label, loved it, and to see the bourbon finished in it was really fascinating. And I would love to dive into that one. No pun intended with the island of diving, but uh, in the 15, 20 minutes or so I got to ask first about the Ambarana. So we've seen that is it's a big trend right now. A lot of companies using Ambarana. Some doing okay, some really overdoing it. Um, and I'll be fully transparent. It's one of those trends that I'm kind of wishing will go away sooner than later. uh, but that being said, the I had written a review recently about another one of my favorite blenders and finishing houses, which is Doc Swinson's, and love what Jesse and the team are doing over there as well. And I often look to them when it comes to finishing to see like, well, if anyone can really do it right, it's probably either Doc's or Barrel. Like it's one of you two, if not both. And I tried their Ambarana finished bourbon. I liked it. I still felt like the Ambarana was just it's such a powerful flavor that, and I know from speaking to the team that they were finishing like some of the barrels they used finished in the Ambarana for a couple of days. not even a long time, a couple of days up to 2 weeks at the maximum. So we're talking some very short time and a ton of flavor. And even then, I was kind of like, it's good, but it's still too much. um, and with Barrel, yours profiled slightly differently to me. Like it was more heavily on the like cinnamon pastry, cinnamon toast crunch side of things, as opposed to the cinnamon essential oil that can really blow out a palate. Um, so I'd love to hear the process for how you guys use the Ambarana and what may have gone right or wrong during the process, and how we got the product that we have now.
It's Amberana can be very polarizing. Just the flavor profile in and of itself, and I've had others, and it's you can really overdo it. Hands down, you can really overdo it, and it's not hard to overdo it. Also worth noting, there are lots of different alternatives, Amberana alternatives. So spirals, chips, um, you know, different types. You can buy them in a bag. So in some cases, and I'm not suggesting this is what any that specifically Doc Swenson's is doing, but I do know that these are available, and people will use these types of chips or spirals as an Amberana finish. And I don't think you get the same sort of flavor contribution from spirals or chips that you get from an actual Amberana barrel. The barrels are very expensive and they're tough to find. And also, finding barrels that are sustainably harvested that have a chain of custody is even more difficult to find. And so that's one of the things. So we started this process, over a year ago, just as knowing that Amberana was very flavorful, very different. It was very interesting to us. So we started playing with this over a year ago, and found a couple of different sources of actual barrels and began our experiments. Um, but we know where our barrels came from. Where in the forest they were chopped down. We know where the wood went, how it was processed, the cooperage who raised the barrels, and it's been all over the world and then back to us. So that's a really fascinating piece of this, and being able to say that these barrels were sustainable, or that the wood was sustainably harvested. We're really proud of that. Um, but in the process of flavor contribution and actually finishing using these barrels, we had good flavor contribution in a couple of days as well. Um, you can let them go out weeks or months. We didn't necessarily do it that way, but over time, that flavor becomes very, very, very concentrated. And with Amberana, it's unlike anything else you'll experience. And if you've not had it, I would encourage you, or anyone listening to this, to try one. So in some cases you like it or you don't. But by blending these things, blending these whiskeys that come out of these casks carefully and intentionally, so that you can mellow the Amberana notes, the baking spice and the clove that can be overwhelming. You can blend those down enough to where they're there, but you can still taste the whiskey. And so that was really what took us the time, was to make sure that we were able to blend the whiskeys in such a way that the Amberana characteristics were still there, but we didn't want you to, open the bottle and pour out a drink and just taste Amberana, because it's as good as it is, you can have too much of a good thing. We really wanted the balance. We really wanted the different concentrations to shine through on the whiskey side. And I feel like we accomplished that very well with this particular product.
I would agree. I can say, just from the Doc Swinson side, just before I forget, they also did what you did with the barrels, the sustainable harvesting. But I also
Oh,
know other
good.
companies that did chips or staves or spirals. And I think, I mean, my ultimate opinion on Ambrana, like I said, is to still it, it's a trend. It can be really flavorful, but so many people have kind of overdone it that um, I agree with you. I hope people go out and try one. My hope is that they will try ones like the Barrel Ambrana, which are more controlled, because that's a better showing of how not only what Ambrana is, but how it should be used, and a recognition of what you were saying, that this is a powerful flavor that continues to concentrate. This is not something you leave whiskey in for a year. You know, so
Yeah.
I can't like that must be just cinnamon aftershave or baking spice aftershave after a year. Um,
Yeah.
I know at least one distillery that did age it that long, and I do not want to try that bottle.
Oh
it's
my
just too
goodness.
much.
I can't imagine.
No. Um, but anyway, but I wanted to ask that because it's clear that how not only where it comes from, but how you use the Ambrana and what form is so important that it was worth asking to know how you guys did it. And so I still between the two, I will still say I like the Tale of Two Islands just a little bit better because again, it's more to me. It evokes that sense memory from the original Gray Label, so it comes back to me that way. But I'm happy to share the Amarana
Yeah.
with my friends as well to show them that yes, it can be done. It can be done.
Yeah.
Uh,
It's really funny that you were able to get your hands on one of the Tale of Two Islands bottles back in what was that 2018, I guess
Something like that,
17 or
yeah.
18 did that. I don't know if you've heard the story, but I'll tell you real quickly. When
Yeah.
we came up with that, this was a one of the blue sky. I talk about blue sky meetings where it's just let's just come up with ideas. Let's talk about off the wall stuff. Let's come up with finishing ideas or blending ideas, whatever it is. And so this day, Joe and I were sitting in the lab, and we probably had 20 samples in front of us, whatever it was, just some of the most off the wall stuff that we could think of, and put all these blends together, and we lined them up across. And of those 20 or so samples, most of them were okay. There were a couple good ones, and then the very last one we tried was this 8-year-old Jamaican pot still rum finished in an Isle of Scotch cask. And it's like, I never thought this would work, and it was amazing. It was absolutely amazing that the full flavored rum with just a touch of the peat, and it's like these things should not work well together like this. This doesn't make a whole lot of sense, but it was fantastic. It was absolutely. I wish we had more of it.
I I think it worked super well, especially because you had the Jamaican rum, like a really strong estery Jamaican rum.
Very highest. Yeah.
Yeah. If it was a different kind of rum, like even a Barbados rum, I think Foursquare is a great distiller. They put out some great rums. I don't think it would have
hmm
worked. But yeah, I think it's a case where you really need strong flavors. I mean, it's peat. When you're dealing with peat, you
Yeah.
need something to stand up against the peat.
One hundred
And
percent.
yeah, and it was just such a great bottling. That was one of the first premium or super premium. I don't know what it would be considered today, but super premium bottles that I bought for myself. And I did it because I knew that I liked the components of it. I didn't know that I liked Jamaican rum as much as I do now, but uh, good Jamaican rum is good Jamaican rum. And
Yes, it is.
yeah, that's I think I still have maybe an ounce or two left of that. As you said, there's never enough, and it's a memory now. Hopefully one day it can be recreated, but still it's a nice memory to have.
Yeah. Well, and then sort of, taking, sort of continuing, I guess, along the same lines with that product. We held on to those barrels. So those
Mm.
Isle of Scotch casks and the original barrels that the rum showed up in, we held on to those and have had whiskey in them or bourbon in them. And so that's what the release we're talking about, the Tale of Two Islands finish, is bourbon finished in those two casks and blended together to create the product. So In an interesting way, the project sort of lives on a little bit because you when you taste the bourbon, you're going to get the rum, you're going to get the estery, oily, um, coated tongue, and you're going to get a little bit of touch of peat in there too. And so it's like it's sort of reminiscent of the Tale of Two Islands blend. So we're real happy with that one.
So as you're celebrating the 10th anniversary of Barrell opening this new facility, uh, more line extensions from the private release rye finish to the cask finishing series, and what we'll talk about in the next question, another new line extension. From an insider's perspective, who's really been there since the beginning or nearabouts, how do you think Barrell has evolved over these 10 years?
So that's a really good question. And when you look back 10 years at where we started, first and foremost, flavor focused on what we're putting in the bottle and started out just blending bourbon. It didn't take long, it wasn't long after that where we started blending with different types of whiskeys also. So we had the blends. And then we started moving in toward finishing. And, all of these steps were progressive steps toward finding more places to get flavor that we can concentrate into a product. And so, we started finishing with one type of cask, which created a product. But then it was, okay, well, if we can do this with one cask, should we do two or should we try three? And the knowledge and experience that we gain from going through the process of not just the blending and the initial finishing, but all of the different types of blend finishings that we did, and then creating blends of even the finished products. It created products such as Seagrass, Dovetail, and Vantage, where we're blending and we're finishing, and then we're blending finishes, and somehow creating these products with different types of whiskeys blended and finished in different types of casks and blended together to create one type of product. And we've really gotten very good at the process of doing this again with products like Dovetail, Seagrass, and Vantage, where we have multiple whiskeys and multiple casks in one product. So we've really evolved our blending and finishing process to be able to accomplish that.
With that, the inevitable question of what is next? What's coming down the pipe?
So we have lots of different types of finishing casks that we are experimenting with right now. Pulling samples every day and just figuring out how the pieces fit together. We've got one thing that you'll actually see here very shortly is a new product that is getting ready to hit the shelves. It's actually been shipped and it should be hitting shelves at any time now, called Foundation. And what Foundation is a 5-year-old 100 proof product bourbon that we have created and released. This is the first product that we've ever done that was not at cask strength. And so that was a lot of fun, blending, using our techniques and our precision blending techniques that we typically use for cask strength products, and doing something that was less than cask strength, specifically 100 proof in this case, was a lot of fun creating this. This new product is at a $55 price point too. So it's something that is going to be more approachable for people to get into the Barrell line. It's something that is going to work well in cocktails. The price point will allow it to be used in cocktails. And what you're going to see in when you try this product is that even at 100 proof, we've managed to again use different ages and different grain builds to create and build complexity, um, like we would do with a traditional cast strength product, but at 100 proof.
And just to circle around on that a little bit, when you were ideating the foundation, did you have a particular profile in mind that you wanted to achieve, or did one develop as you were figuring it out?
So we looked at some of the other products that we've created over the years, and you made cocktails with them, cut different products to different proofs. These are our products specifically, different batches that we all liked, and tried to come up with not an end all be all flavor profile, but more of a starting point of where we wanted to sort of initiate the blending process with foundation. And so we started there, and then the approach from then on, very similar to the way we do all of our other blends, where we're filling in gaps. What's it missing? What else can we use? What complements the flavors that are in here? And so it was that usual process, and then it was, now we have what we think is going to be this finished product. Let's make some cocktails with it and see how it works, which is not something that we traditionally do. But that's what got us to the finished blend in foundation.
And was there, obviously there's an internal desire to create this new product and have this line extension that is more approachable in all the ways that you just described. Was there any pressure from the consumer side for a product like that?
I don't know that I wouldn't say there was direct pressure from the consumer side. I feel like there was room to make the offering. Um, I think having something at a lower proof for all the reasons we've talked about, is something that Barrell should have available, to consumers, again, for the other reasons we've discussed already, just allowing people access, to see what we do, how we do it. It's sort of a glimpse into the brand itself. You can try something for $55 at 100 proof and see the flavor complexities that we've created here, and hopefully spark enough curiosity to where you want to try some of the other stuff that we create. So, yeah, I think it was a good next step for us.
Makes sense. And then I'll give you the last question, which is, after seeing the first two barrel cast finished bourbons, being the Ambrana and the Tale of Two Islands, can we expect more cast finishings? And are there any that you can tease us with?
Well, you're absolutely going to get some more cast finished products. We are going to have two next year released. Next year, we're going to spread them out a little bit. They're not going to be released at the same time. And I think I'm hoping this one gets done next year, but we actually have a group of barrels that, to my knowledge and based on our conversations, that no one else in the country has, at our disposal. Let's just say that. And so we're playing with those barrels, to see what exactly we want to do with these. So I may have created some problems for myself here. I realize that's probably a pretty good teaser and a pretty tall order for myself, but it should be a fun project if we can pull everything off.
You've laid down the gauntlet for yourself on that one. But,
That's right.
but I think it's a great teaser and cliffhanger. So, Tripp, thank you so much for coming on to not only talk about the happenings with Barrell, but to help launch this single barrel release of the rye finished in Armagnac casks. I seriously, this stuff is just so good. I wouldn't put out a barrel pick that I didn't like or didn't stand behind. It's the benefit of not having a store. I don't have to do that. I can really choose which ones I really want to do. And this was just undeniably not only the best of the three, but one of the best finished whiskeys, one of the best whiskeys I've had all year. And I can't wait to have everyone share them, buy them, share them with friends. And so thank you for coming on to help launch that. If you missed, absolutely, you are welcome back anytime.
Sorry, thank you for having me. I appreciate the opportunity. And again, I think you picked a great barrel. And actually, I may have to have a pour myself. I actually had a little bit left in our sample bottle at work. So again, great selection.
Fantastic. And in case you guys missed it earlier in the episode, this is a good time to join Patreon because there's going to be some good benefits coming up for this barrel and for barrels coming up. And with that, Tripp, hang out with me for a minute just after recording to close things out. This has been a very special bonus episode of the Whiskey Ring podcast. As of the time this goes live, you can now jump to the link that will be in the show notes for this bottle. Well, you know what? I'm just going to leave it at that. There will be a link in the bio. And if you still don't want it after hearing what we've been talking about, I can't help you on this one. So anyway, look for the link in the show notes. And there will be a new episode on Wednesday as well. Thank you all for listening. Hope you enjoy it. And I'll see you all in a few days. Hey, folks. Thanks for listening to another episode of the Whiskey Ring podcast. If you like what you hear, please go ahead and click that subscribe, follow, or like button. Leave a rating and review on your podcast app of choice, and let me know what you want to hear. You can reach out to me through the podcast apps or email me at david@whiskeymyweddingring.com with any suggestions or ideas for new show guests. You can also support the podcast at patreon.com/whiskeymyweddingring. That's whiskey with an E, for as little as $1 a month. $5 a month gets you access to bonus content, including our soon-to-resume Under the Influencer series, and $25 a month means you join the Barrel Share Club. Each month, Barrel Share Club members get to try products sent to me for review, bottles from my own collection, and sometimes bottles that I just pick up because they're fun or interesting. Right now, only 5 spots remain in the Barrel Share Club, so grab your place today. Finally, please follow on Instagram. You can follow me at Whiskey My Wedding Ring or at Whiskey Ring Podcast. You can follow me on Twitter at Whiskey Ring. You can follow on Facebook at Whiskey My Wedding Ring or join the Facebook group, the Whiskey Ringers group. And I hope to see you there. Cheers, thank you for the support, and see you next time.